Okay. Okay. Okay, we did it. All right. Let's talk about the ups and downs of Lollipop Chainsaw. I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. Okay, so let me start here. This game has value in the video game industry because there's nothing quite like it. There are games that are similar, and we're going to talk about some of those. But this game has enough uniqueness that it is valuable to the video game space, just because it's this weird combination of totally irreverent, gory toilet humor combined with this hack and slash genre that we've seen before, but that combination is a little bit different than anything we've seen, and it, if nothing else, this is a memorable game. Like, I'm always going to remember this game. There are other games that I've played that are on my list that I barely remember because I've beaten so many since then and because they were kind of generic. This game is not generic, so I think we should start there and say that this game is a singular experience, and I'm glad that I played it, and I'm glad that it exists. The game that this is most like is Bayonetta, probably. Of all the games that I've played, the game that it reminds me of the most is Bayonetta. It's very different in the tone and the humor, but it's this combination of insanity and hack and slash combat. So it's got the Devil May Cry, Dante's Inferno, Bayonetta kind of hack and slash kind of situation, combo, whatever kind of moves, upgrading your combos and stuff. It's got all that. And I played a lot of games like that. I think there are two main problems with this game. One much bigger than the other, and so let's start there. What those other games, Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, Dante's Inferno, God of War, all of those games have better combat than this game. The combat in this game isn't poor. It's not bad, but it's pretty samey. It's pretty vanilla. It's pretty button mashy. I unlocked a combo in the very beginning of the game, one of the first ones I paid for, that ended up being the combo I used almost throughout the entire game. I barely varied from it. There was another one that I picked up right at the end that was pretty good that I started using. But there's not really... There is some variety, but there's not... There are a couple that are clearly better than the rest of them, and so there's not really a lot of need for variety. The combat's just not that varied, and it's not that good. It's not that good. This is especially evident in the boss fights. So the boss fights, Dante's Inferno, Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, God of War, the older God of War games, all of those games have kick-ass boss fights. They're all awesome boss fights. This game does not have good boss fights. The boss fights are probably the worst part of the game. They do seem to make an effort to make them unique. They're all very different in the way that they, at least on their face, they're all very different in the way that you have to take them down or whatever. But it's really just some super easy QTEs. We'll talk about those in a second. Coupled with using your gun, your chainsaw gun, and just button mashing that same combo I was talking about. None of the bosses are actually very good at all. I actually think all the bosses are kind of bad. I have to choose. I choose a favorite boss for every game that has bosses in them. I don't know who I'm going to pick. Maybe the first or the second one, just because I don't remember them being particularly bad. I just don't remember them. The last few are all memorably bad. So that's a problem. Let's talk about the QTEs. They don't seem to matter. This game has this game came out in the heyday of QTEs. I get that. But they don't even seem to matter. There was one point in the end I was just holding my controller up, not hitting any buttons while the QTE prompts were on the screen, and it didn't seem to matter at all. So they give you a ton of time on the QTEs, and even when you don't hit them, I think it either just gives you another chance or it just acts like you did hit it. So that's a lot of time in this game. There's a lot of time for QTEs in this game, and it's all basically wasted. And that's during boss fights, that's during regular fights, that's during cutscenes, and they're everywhere. I don't mind QTEs. I actually kind of like QTEs because I'm pretty good at them. So when there's especially now when they don't put them in every single game anymore. So when I do see them, I'm like, oh, QTE, I can do this. But in this game, they were just the worst. You know, when it comes to I want to make sure before I talk about the tone of the game that we talk about all the gameplay crunchy combat stuff. So that, yeah, boss fights are bad. The combat's not that varied. The levels were boring. I mean, they were fine, I guess, but there wasn't anything particularly bad about them. But I don't remember anything being notable. As far as the actual story and the comedy, which is really what's driving this game, is just the comedy. I don't mind toilet humor. Actually, if it's done the right way, it's hilarious. There's a lot of toilet humor is really the best way to say it. A lot of humor, sexual humor, a lot of just like shit and piss jokes in this game. And there's nothing wrong with that if they're funny. It's not like it has to be smart in order for me to appreciate it as humor. But you know how there are some properties, like South Park is a really good example, where they'll do all that toilet humor. Like they'll just make a whole episode about like feces, and it's like, but it's hilarious, and so like they get a pass because they're so funny. And like they do a lot of political, you know, stuff that's like really crossing the line for anybody else, but because they're so funny, they kind of just get a pass. It felt like this game was it didn't do anything like political or controversial really, other than a lot of sexual jokes about somebody whose 18th birthday is today. But aside from that, there's not really anything like controversial, but it's not clever at all. And I would say that it's not really that funny. And so because it's not funny, hearing curse words and like sexual references and toilet humor pretty much constantly gets old really fast, because it's not that well written. And so it's just like, you know what it gives me the idea of? It's like some old dudes went into a room and like, hey, what will the kids think is really funny? Let's just make it really over the top. That's what it feels like. It's not actually genuinely funny. And so because of that, it just comes off as gross. This game is gross. It's just a lot of gross stuff. And you know, whatever. I mean, I can forgive that, but that on top, having to deal with that at the same time as having to deal with pretty boring, monotonous gameplay started to get pretty tiresome pretty fast. The first couple of stages of this game, I was thinking, you know, this game's not really grabbing me, and I feel like it's kind of like Bayonetta, but not as good. But you know, a lesser version of Bayonetta is still a good game. You know, I can enjoy this. But by the third stage, by like starting to get to like a third to halfway through the game, I was really starting to get bored, tired of it. And just like they'd say some joke, and I'm just like, ugh, I don't even know how to. I'm like trying to give commentary on these videos. I don't even know how to respond. I'm just like, okay, there's another one. You know, and there were 4 or 5 times that they actually did kind of get me, and they said something that I thought was pretty funny. But when you're telling jokes every 30 seconds, and, you know, 4 or 5 is not that much. So I didn't think that the humor was that good. And I'm not some like hoity-toity, like it's all got to be highbrow humor. You know, I think there are a lot of games that I've like freaking Stick of Truth. I thought was hilarious, and that's got way more controversial, disgusting humor than this. Way more. But it's also really well written and actually hilarious. This game wasn't really that funny, and so because of that, everything just seemed kind of nasty, just off-putting. You know, other than that, I guess the only other thing I'll say is that like in a world where we're getting remaster after remaster, and there are lots of different ways to remaster a game. Playing something for $40 that really is nothing more than just a straight port with a fresh coat of paint. I mean, they didn't even update the assets really. That's a bit, I think that's a bit much. The game plays, I mean, I guess I'd have to go back and look at original gameplay, but it looks like a 2012 game. It looks like it's just kind of an upscaled resolution of the original game. And so I feel like $39.99 is a bit high for that, especially considering how short it is. It's a pretty short game. And it wasn't really that challenging. I mean, we talked about the combat a little bit, but I only died 12 times, and 3/4 of those were during this one mini game that sucked ass. Oh, that's another thing. They didn't really explain things very well. There would be a mini game that would start, and it's like, oh, I've never seen this before. What's this? And then I'd be dead suddenly. And it's like, what was I supposed to do? There were a couple times that they would hint, like, you need to shoot the helicopter or whatever times, but there were twice as many times where they wouldn't do that. And then you just get blown up a few times until you figure out what to do. Usually the game's easy enough that it doesn't matter. But most of my deaths came from just weird, confusing moments in a single minigame. So, all right. Overall, what I will say is that, again, I'm glad this game exists. I'm glad that I played it. I don't mind that I spent $40 on it, because I spend money on games all the time that I don't end up finishing, and I at least finished this. So, but you're somebody that only buys 10, 12 games a year or less that buys this, they might end up being disappointed if they've never played this before. If they're expecting something like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, they're going to be disappointed. It's not nearly as good as those. I guess the reason this game exists in the zeitgeist still is because it's so loud and in your face that there isn't anything quite like it. And so, you know, like I said, it takes up a space in the video game industry that's valuable because it's something, at least. It's not a vanilla game, you know, so I'm glad that I played it. I'm glad that I can say that I've beaten it, but I didn't really have a lot of fun. I was just mostly hitting square and triangle the whole time. That's really all I did. And there wasn't really anything in the tone or the story or the humor that made that worth it. So I didn't hate it. I really didn't hate it. I feel like this is coming off super negative. I didn't hate it. I just didn't think it was particularly good. The only thing that was really memorable about it was the insanity, and I did appreciate some of that. But again, it wasn't really that funny or clever, so. All right. We'll stop it there. Last couple of things before we end here. The bottom center of the screen says that we have beaten 83 games in 2024 and 530 since we started doing this in 2020. Those numbers now need to be updated. We've now beaten 84 games in 2024 and 531 since we started doing this. Let's go. Okay, last order of business. We'll just go ahead and get out of this. Lollipop Chainsaw RePOP. It's been fun at times. I appreciate you existing, but we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye. Thank you.